So welcome back to another video on my channel where we are looking at this custom navigation bar component. If you followed the last couple of videos, we've built this navigation bar component up completely from scratch. So please go and check those videos out if you are learning Flutterflow and you're looking to create something similar for your own applications. But in this particular video, we're going to make some further enhancements to it and make this responsive. We're going to want to change its position. We're going to want to change its look depending on the size of the device that it's actually running on. So for example, as you may recall from the previous videos here, as I move through these buttons, we've got this kind of little plus action button here that we can click on and we can carry out something on the page. And of course, as I move across, the little plus button disappears. So again, that's customizable within inside this particular component. But the magic happens, of course, when you then start moving up sides of devices. If I just now flip this now to the desktop view, you can see now that it's positioned nicely up here on the sort of the right side of the screen. And again, it's got all of the kind of functionality that we've kind of got in the one that sits across the bottom. But of course, there's some few changes to it. We kind of got orientations here of the little selector to tell us what pages we're on. The little plus bar button, sorry, comes in from the right hand side. So of course, you can move this to the bottom right, top, left. You can move this wherever you would like on your display, depending on your use case. So we're now going to go through how we make those changes to this custom navigation bar component. Of course, if you would like to follow along, please do check the link in the description because I'll get you to right where you need to be, and then we can then start making those changes together. So of course, if you're learning Flutterflow, then this is a great video which will sort of drill in maybe some of those areas that you perhaps not looked at previously when it comes to responsive conditions within inside your Flutterflow project. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's get cracking. Okay, so let's start then. This is the cloned project. Let's now start by renaming the component. This no longer is a bottom navigation bar component. It's going to be a custom navigation component now. So I'm just going to double click on this and type in custom navigation component, just hit enter. So that's all renamed. Let's now actually go into the component now. Let's start making some changes to it. Okay, so within this particular component, what we now need to do is we now need to rename the widgets we have on the left-hand side. We're going to want to have a horizontal representation of our navigation component, and we're also going to want to have a vertical implementation of our component. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select floating navigation container. Just going to move over to the pen here. I'm just going to move my cursor over to the term navigation and just going to put HOR and press enter. That now represents a horizontal one. If I just choose a central button, let's rename that as well. Let's just pop HOR in after the button. And there we go. Those are now renamed. So now we've got that. Let's just move the canvas out a little bit, because the beauty of working with inside Flutterflow, of course, is that when you are working in the actual design canvas itself, when you are actually turning on some of the responsive options, then they will play out with inside the actual user interface itself, which is really, really handy. In a moment, I'm going to be hiding this because I don't want this to be shown on a tablet and above size device. So that's great. It means I can then focus my attention on actually building the actual vertical representation of the navigation bar as well. So let's now select the floating navigation HOR container, and of course this is where I can now start turning these off. So what I'm going to do is, for this particular component, I'm only going to display when it's actually on a phone itself. So that means I can tick on the actual that one there, and that one there, and you can see now that we're actually hidden now from a tablet, from a kind of a landscape sort of tablet, and then of course the desktop as well. So they're all gone. I now need to do exactly the same thing for the actual button as well. So let's just turn that one off, that one off, and that one off. So you can see we've got nothing now on the actual canvas itself. So next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just duplicate these components. I'm just going to right click here on the floating nav. Let's just actually duplicate this now. As you can see, let's just collapse these down here. And I'm also going to want to do the same thing for the button as well. So let's just right click on that and say duplicate. So there they are. Let's just collapse those down. So what I'm going to do, the first one here, I'm just going to change this now to VER. So just like we did with HOR, let's now move up here to VER. So that's now going to represent my vertical one. And if I go to the second button here, let's go up to the little pen. Let's now just take out HOR there and choose VER. Just hit the tick there. So that's good. Now, of course, I'm now going to change the responsive options for these particular ones. So let's now just change our selection. Let's now put the little tick there, so the cross, and let's now bring these actually into view. And you can see that one's come back. If I now go to the central button VER container, I do exactly the same thing, turn that one off, but turn these to be active. There we go. So right back to where we were that we had previously. So we know that we can now distinguish between our vertical and our horizontal representations within inside our application. Okay, so next up we need to replace a widget. So we're just going to focus our attention on working on these particular components here. Now we're going to keep these ones as they are. So let's now just expand the actual navigation item row here. So I just collapse down all of our sort of buttons here. So let's just bring those down into view. There we go. So I'm now going to replace this because we no longer want an actual horizontal representation of all of these children. We're going to want to now convert this now into an actual column. So you can just right click here, we can actually say replace widget, and you can just say column like that. Now of course don't worry about what the UI is looking like at this particular moment, but everything is now turned from a horizontal to a vertical column. That is absolutely fine. So next up, let's move over to the actual item spacing here. So we're just going to apply 16 to these. Now you'll see how that's going to be more useful a little bit later when we evenly kind of space everything out. And I'm just going to move the main axis alignment here to be centered. So again, it just means that everything is nicely positioned within inside the vertical stack when we've actually got them on the display. Okay, so next we need to change the floating navigation ver container. We're going to want to now change the actual shape of this container. So with that selected, let's move over here to the actual width. Now we're going to want to change the width. We don't want it to be 360. We're going to want to kind of flip these around to some extent. So just change the width here, just move that to 70. Now with the height, this is going to be slightly different. I'm just going to delete that out there. So what we need to do is we now need to make a change to our application, because we know at this moment that within this particular component we can show and hide this actual plus button, but of course we're going to want to change the height of the actual container itself depending on whether this is actually being displayed or not. So we need to do a condition here and set the right value using the component parameter. So let's just choose a little selector here. Let's move just down here and to do the conditional value. So just choose that. And we're going to want to now make a choice. We're going to go to conditions here, choose a single condition. Now the first value, we're just going to choose a selector here, and we're going to look for this show central button option. So just choose that. Now, of course, if that is equal to true, so therefore we've got it enabled on the actual parent page, confirm that, we're going to want to then set the height to then be, in this instance, to be 360, which is very similar to what we had before when it was displayed on the actual horizontal. Now, of course, if the value, if that is not selected, then we can then reduce the height of that container. So let's now put a value in there of 284. I think that should be sufficient. Just hit confirm. And of course, that's now set. Now, of course, we're not going to see anything change in the actual UI at the moment, but that's pretty well much ready to go for us. So next up, we need to then focus on the actual alignment. We're going to want to now position this over to the right hand side. Now, of course, if your use case is different, you can actually push this over to the left hand side. So with the actual floating navigation VER container selected, we can now move on the alignment option. So we can move it right or we can move it left, depending on what you want to do, but we're just going to shift it to the right hand side here. Now, what I'm going to also do is I'm just going to remove the padding here on the left and to the bottom. So we can just simply do that by just deleting that from here and deleting the 16 from there. So of course, if you moved it to the other side, then just it's on the other side that you just need to make those adjustments. So that is all set for us. Okay, so next up we need to do some widget replacement and some renaming just to keep it in keeping with the actual kind of design that we got here. So you can see here on the navigation item row, the first thing that we're going to want to do is rename this particular widget. So with that selected, I'm just going to come up here. I'm just going to remove the term row, of course, because this is no longer a row. This is actually a column. There we go. And then down these particular widgets here, of course, now these are representing each of the icons that we've actually got with it inside the actual navigation bar. Well, of course, but they're no longer going to want to be columns, all right? And the reason why that is the case is because you can see under each of these, we've kind of got this little animated kind of bar. Now that just sits underneath the icon, but in our case, we're going to want to put the animated icon here in a more vertical position. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click here and I'm going to say replace widget. I'm going to say this is now a row, and I'm just going to, with that selected, just remove the term column here because it's no longer a column. It's going to be a row. Now I'm just going to do exactly the same thing now to the rest of these, and we'll come back when it's done. Okay, so now that is done, you can see I've renamed all of these now to row there. So if you just do the same in yours. Now, if I just expand this out, let me just collapse this one down a little bit. So you can see here that we've got this kind of this horizontal kind of divider. That's actually illegal with inside Flutterflow. You can't actually have this as a horizontal divider with inside an actual row. So there's a little quirk in the UI there of Flutterflow, which hasn't kind of errored when I tried converting this actually to a row. So don't worry about that. We're not going to worry too much. We're just going to click on the little plus here, and we're going to add a brand new one called vertical divider. So just choose that. Let's just move this up to the position that's just here, so it's just above. You can see it's kind of going a little bit crazy here on the right hand side, but we just need to make some adjustments to this. So the thickness I'm going to set is 2. With the height I'm just going to set this to 30, and then with the width I'm just going to set this as 2. So that's fine at the moment. What we also need to do is we need to actually copy some of the characteristics from here as well. So with the home divider selected, let's move over to the actual animations itself. Let's firstly copy this animation. So just select this and say copy all animations. Let's move over to the vertical divider. Let's go to the animations and let's just paste all the animations in there. So that's all perfectly there. So just choose the little toggle itself. We just need to move down to this particular scale option, and we're just going to change this, okay, because we don't really need to worry about this being an X kind of axes kind of change. We're just going to change this, and our initial scale here is going to be 0.6. So as I just sort of preview this out, you can just see here very carefully in this area here, you can see the animation playing out how we want it. So that's the only change that we need to make there. So what we can also do is this has got a conditional visibility. Now we need to make that change as well. So just select this here, go back to the little option here, move to the conditional and just select, sort of make that show, and then with inside here let's just click on the little 2 dots, or sorry, 3 dots, hit copy variable, and then we can then go back over to the vertical divider, and then we can actually then just go here and then actually paste that. Actually, it's just turn that on, and with inside here choose the little paste option and then just hit confirm. And then that's going to get the same conditional visibility settings all set for us. So that's good. So we can now delete this one out. We don't need this anymore. So just right click here. Let's just actually get rid of that. That's good. So you can see here now that things are looking a little bit better for us with our vertical divider. Okay, so on each of the actual home row, one thing I've just need to select here is on the home row, we need to actually just choose the main axis alignment is centered. That's going to now bring that over nicely to the center. So that's good. So that's pretty well much our template set now. We now need to apply the same to each of these here. Now what I'm going to do is, I think the quickest way to actually do this is just select this, actually copy the actual widget itself, and what we can now do is then move through each of these and delete the one that's currently in there. So let's just open that one up here. Let's just get rid of this here. So just highlight that, hit delete, and then I'm going to just right click up here and I'm then going to paste this one in, and then we can then drag that up here and just let go at that point there. So you can now see that this is here, and I'm going to go to the note row again with that selected. I'm just going to choose the main axis alignment and bring that over. Now one thing we're also going to need to do is with inside the actual vertical divider, the visibility, of course, this says selected page index is 1. Now of course this needs to be 2, and then this one needs to be 3, and this one needs to be 4. So I'm just going to, with this selected, just go back over to the conditional, hit the show there, select this, and I'm going to set this now to number 2. That's all done for us. That's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do exactly those steps. I'm just going to apply it to the profile row and the settings row, and I'm going to set that page index to then 3 and 4 respectively, and then we'll come back when that's done. Okay, so they're all now set. You can see here that all nicely positioned here, nice and central. So just make sure you've got the main axis alignment and make sure you've just set all of those selected page indexes. And that's what you should be presented with now. So that's looking good. If we were to fire this up now, we can actually see that our actual navbar can actually be on the right hand side. But we need to handle the central button as well. So let's now work on that. So let's now just collapse the navigation vert. Let's now focus on this here. Let's just choose the actual central button. Let's firstly move the actual padding from the bottom. We don't actually need that. So let's move that out of the way. And we now need to choose the alignment. So let's move that to now central. So you can see here that's looking good. But of course, it's now positioned a little bit too far now over on the right hand side. Now, if you remember, there's 16 pixels between this and here. So you can guess now that the padding on here just needs to be 16 to make it nice and central. So of course you can see now that everything is looking pretty good for us. Now, of course, as I expand that out, we've got no default actually set on the actual floating sort of navigation for containers. So let's actually do that. It's just with that selected. Let's move back over here and down the bottom here. Let's choose a default value. So this really is just meaning that actually, if we never set any of these settings, then the default would be 360. So this means that actually when we now set that, you can see now that it's respected within inside the design canvas as well by setting a default option. So that is looking pretty good for us. We just need to work on this animation, but of course if we were to have this selected now, you see the animation is going to look a little bit odd because it's going to come from the bottom. If I just choose the little play here, if I preview that, you can see it's coming up from the bottom, which is what we don't want to do. So let's now go to the slide option here. We can quite simply change this. So the vertical slide is now going to change. Just bring that to 0, and the initial position of the actual horizontal slide is going to be 4. So if I now preview this, you can see now it's coming in slightly from the right hand side and central. So that is looking good. Let's quickly now spin this up within test mode and let's see if this looks good. Okay, so here we are then in test mode. You can see here that everything is working quite nicely for us in our display. Now if I just now move up to say desktop size, you can see now that our navigation is positioned nicely here on the right hand side just as we want it. That's looking pretty good. If I just move through here, yeah, that's great. We've got the plus button nice and central here. Everything's looking pretty good. I think there's probably a few more enhancements we can actually make here. We can see that we need a little bit more spacing maybe between this divider and this actual button because it's just clashing there slightly. I think the spacing between the buttons is looking pretty good here. There's no clashes going on. So actually we're in a good place. Let's quickly go and adjust this particular divider here. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space. Okay, so the way that we do that is we just collapse the central button here. Let's expand the actual floating navigation. Now, it's actually the home row, okay, so we need to put some space in. So this is where we just need to use item space. If I just choose 4 here, you can see we space out. Let's just quickly go through these and put 4 in all the rest. There we go, 4 on the last one. Let's go back to test mode. Let's do an instant reload. Okay, let's have a look here. You can see here now perfectly, that's nicely spaced out now, which gives us the effect that we need. Okay, so there's a couple of extra things that we need to do. So you can see here that actually, as I scroll down, we've kind of got this big gap here at the bottom. Now remember, in the previous video, we actually put some spacing here on purpose to look after our navigation. So it keeps itself nicely isolated away from the actual scrolling content. But we want to bring this in. Responsively, we're going to want to bring this in. Okay, we don't want to keep it as this 100 width. Now, how do we do that? Let's move back here. Let's go back to the actual home page itself. So if I just scroll down here, you can see that that is therefore being kind of respected. So what we need to do is we now need to adjust it. So if I move to the actual page content column, you can see here we've got this end spacing of 100, which is kind of enforcing that gap. We now need to make an adjustment. If I just choose the little selector here, we now want to use these responsive value options. So if I just select that, now you can see here that what this is basically saying is if our screen width is less than the actual breakpoint, which is the small breakpoint, then what's going to mean is this is actually for the mobile size. So of course, if it's that, then we need to maintain that value as 100. But anything bigger than that, we're going to want to then set that as say 16. So let's just delete these other ones out because we don't need to do breakpoints for other sort of screen sizes, but we're just going to now choose 16. If I now confirm that, now you won't see nothing visually here, but if I now go back to the test mode and just refresh, okay, so if I now scroll down here, you can see now that on an actual kind of a larger display, you can see that now we're respecting the 16 pixel. But if I now move down to mobile, then we should be able to see that still respect the 100 pixels that we got. So that's kind of how you would adjust certain widgets and sizes and spaces and all that kind of stuff by using some of the responsive breakpoints that's available to you right within inside the UI of Flutterflow. Okay then, just some final thoughts then on the customization options you've got for this particular component. Of course, your use case could be completely different here. But of course, if you were to move this over to the left-hand side, so by just choosing the floating navigation container, just click on the little left alignment option here. Of course, you can move this particular vertical divider to the right-hand side here. So that would obviously play out exactly the same way, no problem at all. You might want to then adjust the padding of the actual container to kind of bring it off the actual left-hand side of your page, or you might choose you want to actually very much stack to the left hand side, where of course you don't need to change any of the padding for this particular container. So that's pretty nice. If you would look for perhaps maybe you would like to change the border color, for example, so you could come down here to border color. Let's just go down here to say the line color here. Let's choose a border width of 2 here, and if I click away, you can see I've kind of got this white kind of border effect. If you just kind of want to lift that a little bit more away from the actual UI display itself, or you might choose not to have no border at all, and you might decide to have like a shadow or something like that. Of course, the great thing about obviously Flutter here is you can actually change all of that option as well. If you want to have some elevation on here and you want to put some sort of box shadows and all that kind of stuff, you've got all those options to customize how you want it to be within inside your application. So I'm just going to clear that color. Let's just move the border out of there. We don't really need that here. So of course you've got those options. One thing you might want to also do is if you are increasing this with more options, so you've got more of these rows within inside the navigation item column, just make sure that you remember to adjust the actual height here. So just move to the actual height itself. And of course, you're going to increase or decrease the value that you've got in here, depending on how many rows that you've actually got within inside your actual navigation bar. Now, the great thing about this is because the floating navigation, the vertical one, is completely separate from your horizontal one, then it might be that within inside a web application, for example, you might have more options on display than perhaps you would have across the bottom. So of course, you can customize that as you want, and the good thing is all of this is being picked up here from the actual parameters that you're passing into the actual component itself. So both navigation bars will respect any logic that you apply to both of them, which is great. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this video where we've further extended our custom navigation bar component. Of course, please do keep your ideas coming in. If you would like to see more UI kind of stuff, then please let me know, because I very much enjoy putting these style of videos together, and I know you guys are enjoying it as well, because I certainly see that from all of the comments which I do read across all of my videos. And of course, please do like the video. Really do appreciate your likes. It really gets these videos out to the community. And of course, if you love this type of content and this walkthrough style that I do, then please do obviously subscribe to the channel as well. So until the next video, I'll see you soon.